continuance from a video that had to get cut off. And I'm not going to repeat myself in that video. So anyways, your endurance muscle uses oxygen that, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, that you breathe in. Type 2A muscle and type 2B muscle does not. It does use oxygen that comes from your red blood cells, but it's oxygen that's already in the cell. Alright, now endurance muscle burns that oxygen with glucose. However, type 2A muscle burns that oxygen with glucose as well as with some proteins. Okay? Type 2B muscle burns it entirely with proteins. So, type 2B muscle or sprint muscle burns burns oxygen with things like burns it with some weird things. There's still glucose going on. It's still burning it with glucose to a degree, but it is also using creatine and anything else it can, and I forget all the things that it uses, but creatine's one of them. It is using these other things to create energy, alright? Or to basically expand and contract. Well, it's contract is what muscles do. They don't really expand. But, and as that muscle cell contracts, it's burning what it has inside of it, and that can't just be restored by breathing. Okay, so 10 seconds on means several minutes off. So it's a lot like nitrous in video games. Nitrous in video games refuels throughout the race, but whenever you use it, it doesn't just come right back into your car. You have to maybe finish a lap to get it, or you have to go, like Need for Speed. Need for Speed has some where you build it up as you go, and so does many other. There's many racing games where you get like nitrous that slowly builds all the time, which is somewhat unrealistic because it's not how it works with real cars, but it is how it works with sprint muscle. Basically, over time, your sprint muscle regains itself, okay? And as your sprint muscle regains, you have fuel again, and you can sprint again. But you can only sprint so much the next time because of micro tears and problems with the sprint muscles themselves dying. And that slows you down a little bit. That's why when you're out of shape, the fitness of those cells tends to wind up letting them die more often. So, the fitter they are, the less likely they will be to die, the more total muscle mass you'll have, and whatnot else. So, this will define your type of cyclist. Okay? There's not much to talk about the forces, other than to just dive right into the training and what it takes to be, fast on a bike. So that's kind of what this will be titled, I guess. So let's just dive into it. There are basically three types of cyclists. Cyclists that are good at everything, kind of evenly. Cyclists that are great at sprinting, and cyclists that are great at climbing. That is about it. Okay? Those are the main three. There are those who are better at up and down rolling hills, but those are usually sprinters. Okay? And I'll explain why later. There are those that are great at breakaways, and sometimes those that are really good at breakaways have really, really strong type 2A muscle. It's not just about the muscle, it's about your overall fitness and stuff. But, we'll get there. So, body styles have three different types, and those types range from the stockier, bigger boned people, okay, down into the, there she goes, down into the, those who are mid bones, like yours truly is kind of mid boned, and then there's the The elite bicyclists, just kidding. Then there's the skinny ones, okay, and people that have a hard time gaining weight. And people that have a hard time gaining weight have the easiest with cycling. Okay, their only issue is issues with food and overtraining, because they can train themselves into the point where their bodies lose muscle, and that's creates a lot of anorexic cyclists. Now, I've met a lot of cyclists who are indeed actually anorexic. Okay, there's actually a pretty fine line between elite cycling, getting your body into elite cycling shape, and anorexia if you happen to be really, really thin boned. Okay, if you're really thin boned or small boned, then your body and in general, overall your body's chemistry. Okay, and this is it's partly um, skeletal. Musculoskeletal genetics will decide your height, your shoulders width versus your height, your hip width versus your height, and those things are what make you big boned, medium boned, or small boned. So I kind of have average shoulders for my height, which is 6'3". I kind of have average hips, which are, I think, I got about 35 inches or something like that for 6'3". And a lot of tall, skinny people, their hips are about 32, 34 inches. A lot of taller people who are big boned and, rather large, their hips will be, if they're not obese, their hips will be around 38 to 42 inches. Okay, but mine's about 36, 35 to 37 really, depending on whether or not I have some fat to lose. So if you measure my hip bone, it's kind of in between the bone of the bigger bone and the smaller bone, and that's a real thing. That's not a joke to make fat people feel better. That's a real thing. And people that are obese oftentimes have this problem where it's difficult for their bodies to lose weight. The extreme example is sumo wrestlers, genetically have bigger bones, and they actually have some of the biggest bones on the planet. And I mean the biggest bones. I mean their skulls, their shoulders width, and their hip width, their hip bones are all really rather large. Okay, which makes sense that it's easy for them to gain lots of weight and get up to over 300-400 pounds. They're never going to be cyclists. Okay, now bikes actually have weight limits. Okay, this bike here has a weight limit of 250 safe pounds. This with all cargo. This bike up here. This bike down here doesn't really say. I couldn't find one online, so it's pretty much the kind of bike you can probably weigh quite a bit and still ride it. And since it has 2-inch tires, you should be pretty golden. If you max out the tire pressure, you should be pretty golden. But it stands to reason that bigger tires, are help spread the weight and whatnot. And if you're obese, you should lose weight first on a bike like this, and then go to a bike like that. The road bike in the front there. Okay. Then what you need to do, okay, after you've lost some weight, to be honest, if you're really big boned, you need to give up. If you have cycling hopes and dreams, you need to give up on them, because it's just not going to happen. Not in road racing. Maybe you can be a mountain bike racer or something else, but I've never seen anybody who's really, honest to God, big boned. There are medium bones. There's medium bones in the elites. There's medium bones throughout amateur cycling. Okay? The guy from Cyclists, if you look him up, he's kind of in the middle. But that will kind of define your strengths. Most people in the middle have more sprint muscle fibers. Okay? Which is also part of the musculoskeletal thing. Okay? Having more sprint muscle fibers, from birth, means that you'll be able to train your sprinting up higher, which means most sprinters on the track have medium frames for their bones, and they have lots of sprint muscle without really weighing too much. Okay, so they don't have too much fat. They still have relatively low 12% body fat ratio, but they have lots and lots of muscle stacked on their body that allows them to have several thousand watts. So let's talk about some humbling numbers here. The most sprint pros have well over 1715 watts. 1750 watts. Okay, I think I just said 15, but anyways. So yeah, so 1700 watts. That's quite a bit. And on and up from there, depending on what sprint event they're doing. It's not all track racers, it's track sprinters specifically. There is no road sprinting. Okay, other than land speed records, there's no road sprinting. That's dedicated sprinting. Let's just see how fast we can go and how short of a distance. There is only track sprinting. So there's no professional road sprinting event that's 100 or 200 meters in length. Okay, or you're sprinting on the road. There's just not. Or 500 meters or anything like that. Don't exist. Okay. Humans can produce a maximum of about 3 horsepower, which is approximately 2300 watts. That's about what humans can do. Okay, and only some humans can do that. One of those humans, who looks like he's on steroids, and I forget his name, he is a German track sprinter. He's the one who did the human versus toaster, and he did that at 700 watts, but he wasn't even breaking a sweat to do that. Okay, because his maximum watts that's an impressive 2,300 watts to my knowledge. To my knowledge, that's a guesstimate. And here's the deal. He has a cute little genetics factor called Myostatin Deficiency. And I don't know whether or not it's from taking drugs that are myostatin inhibitors or if it's natural, but either way, myostatin deficiency allows your body to gain more muscle because myostatin tells your body not to have too much muscle. So this kid literally has too much muscle, which is insane. It means that he's able to kind of be unleashed. There's health defects to that. And that's why he's a sprinter and not an endurance rider, because his heart muscle would have too much of a problem keeping up with his body. That's true with most sprinters, but it's mostly true because of the type 2B sprint muscle fiber mass problem, which is that you have to build lots of muscle mass for those fibers to really start to be activated well. And this is why in the Tour de France and in amateur races as well, you'll see people with different sized legs. Okay, Endurance Rider has mentioned Chris Froome having skinny legs. And that's really just his body style, and so he's not a very good. Chris Froome isn't a very good sprinter. I don't think he even produces 18 watts per kilo, which is pretty low. Decent sprinters have 20 to 25 watts per kilo, so 18 is relatively a low number. I think that's 12 or 1300 watts for him. And overall watts period matter because of pushing through air resistance. So eventually, he's just going to be outclassed in sprints, whereas somebody like Mark Cavendish, who's quite a bit heavier with larger legs, has a lot more sprint potential, and he could do 1500 watts, which is closer to 20 watts per kilo. Okay? So, this big myth that people top out at 1,000 or even 700 watts is stupid. That's what your average person off the street would produce. Okay? And, to be honest, most people will never even see 800 watts. They won't. And women, it's even worse because women have more endurance than sprint muscle. They will almost never see 1,000. I think world record women hardly have 1,200 watts. Okay. So, we'll talk more about that. I'm not saying anything about women. I'm just saying that people with certain body styles, including females in general, just don't have the power. But sprinting is everything. We'll talk more about the other muscle types in the next video.